What kind of parent sells their own daughter just because she cannot have children? The question echoed in Mabel's mind as her father shoved her into the dusty market square, forcing her to stumble in front of strangers. Her boots scraped the ground. The spring wind carried the smell of manure and smoke, but the worst smell was shame. It clung to her like dirt that would not wash away. People stared. Men laughed. Women whispered behind their hands. Children peeked from behind skirts with wide, curious eyes. Mabel's heart pounded as her father raised his voice. "Half the price of a steer, folks. She can cook, sew, and keep quiet. Anyone with enough coin can take her home tonight." Mabel felt heat rise in her face. Not from the sun, but from memory. Memories of her wedding dress being torn. Memories of being dragged from her husband's house after 2 years of trying, praying, begging to be enough. She had swallowed bitter herbs, cried at night, begged God for a child. Nothing came. So her husband married another girl. Younger. Louder. One who promised the family 5 sons. They kicked Mabel out the same day. Now here she stood. Dust on her hem. A satchel with almost nothing in it. No home. No future. Branded, broken like faulty livestock. Her father barked again. Anyone? 22 years old. Still got her teeth. Only faulty on the inside. Silence followed. Long, ugly, heavy. Then the crowd shifted. A man stepped forward. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in sawdust and sap. His hat hid most of his face, but his eyes were not cruel. Just tired. Deep tired. Like a man who had climbed too many hard mountains. Silas. He reached into his coat, pulled out a leather pouch, and dropped it on the table. No words. No bartering. The coins clinked. Her father chuckled. "You sure she don't come with a refund?" Silas met Mabel's eyes for one moment, a long, steady look. Then he turned to her father. "She won't be judged anymore." That was all he said. Then he walked away without checking if she followed. Mabel froze. Was this mercy or another kind of trap? The crowd drifted off. Her father gave her a shove. "Go on, you're his now." Her throat tightened. She picked up her satchel and followed the lumberjack through the blowing dust. He had a mule-drawn cart waiting outside the blacksmith's shop. He did not help her up. He did not look at her. He simply waited. When she climbed in, he handed her a canteen. "Long ride," he said. The water tasted like tin in silence. They traveled for hours. The prairie rolled forever, touched only by fences leaning like tired old men. Mabel kept glancing at him. He looked around 30, maybe younger. Rough hands. A nick on the knuckle, a splinter stuck in his thumb. He wore no wedding ring. Her voice shook when she asked, "Why did you take me?" He kept his eyes on the road. 4 kids, no mother. Her breath hitched. "So I'm a governess?" "No." His voice was low, steady, just someone not cruel. "That's enough." The cart rocked as they crossed a dry creek bed. Mabel looked down at her hands and wondered if kindness this quiet could be trusted. Night settled by the time they reached his cabin, tucked in a grove of pine and cottonwood. The porch leaned forward like it might fall. Chickens scattered as the cart rolled in. A wagon wheel rested against a barn wall. 4 children peeked from behind a curtain. 3 boys and 1 girl. Wide-eyed, watchful. Silas lifted the youngest boy, hardly 3 years old, with one hand and opened the door with the other. "This is Miss Mabel," he said. "She'll be staying." No welcome, no smile. But no cruelty either. Mabel followed him inside. The cabin smelled of pine resin, old bread, and children's socks. It was small, patched with care and worn down by life. "Room's upstairs," he said. "Warm water in the bucket." She climbed the stairs with shaky legs. The room was plain but clean. A quilt on the bed. A small window with a view of the field. She sat on the edge of the mattress and let the tears fall. Soft, silently. This life was not chosen. But for the first time in weeks, no one looked at her with disgust. The next days moved slowly. The children were wild like pups, quick to run, slow to trust. Josiah, the oldest, watched her with narrowed eyes. Eli, second oldest, was always hungry. Hannah clung to Silas like a shadow. The youngest, Benji, crawled around like a little bear cub and followed Mabel everywhere. She cooked. She burned beans. The bread refused to rise. Her hands shook when she tried sewing socks. She felt clumsy and useless. One afternoon, she dropped a pot of stew. It crashed to the floor, splashing everywhere. She froze, waiting for yelling, or worse. Silas walked over, bent down, picked up the pot, and said only, "It's just stew." He did not raise his voice. He did not look angry. He simply cleaned the mess and walked away. That night, she tried to cry quietly on the porch, but one tear fell, then another, until the whole world blurred. A storm rolled in before dawn. Wind rattled the walls. Trees bent and groaned. Hannah woke burning with fever, crying weakly for her papa. Silas held the girl helplessly, fear written across his usually still face. Mabel moved before she even thought. She boiled willow bark. She crushed mint. She placed cool cloths on the girl's forehead. All night she worked. Her hands never stopped shaking. Her voice never stopped murmuring soft comfort. When the sun rose, the fever had broken. Hannah opened her eyes. Silas stared at Mabel like she had done something holy. He said nothing, but his shoulders loosened for the first time. Later that morning, on the table, she found a mug of tea and a small note. "Thank you." Her throat tightened. No one had thanked her in years. And for the first time in a very long time, she felt something she thought had died inside her. Hope. What happens when the first people to call you family are the same ones who were once strangers? The days that followed Hannah's fever changed something in the cabin. It was not loud or sudden. It was quiet, like snow melting under the sun. The children stayed closer to Mabel. Benji followed her from room to room. Hannah asked her to braid her hair every morning. Josiah still watched her with serious eyes, but he no longer frowned. Mabel learned their routines. She cooked simple meals, swept the floors, washed clothes by the creek. Her hands grew steadier. Her voice grew braver, and she started humming again. Soft, old songs she barely remembered. Silas spoke little, but he always noticed things. The way she stretched her back after lifting a heavy pot. The way she winced when her fingers cracked from the cold. The way Benji tugged her dress as if she were the safest place in the house. One chilly afternoon, Silas asked her to ride with him into town. He tossed her the reins like she belonged beside him. She rode quietly, the wind tugging at her hair, her heart unsure of what she meant to this home. When they reached the general store, Silas went inside for nails and salt. Mabel stepped out to wait in the shade, but the market was busy and whispers traveled fast. "Well, look who crawled back," a sharp voice said. Mabel froze. Her mother-in-law stood nearby, fanning herself with a folded newspaper. The new wife stood beside her, gloves clean and pretty, chin raised high. "That's her," the younger woman said loudly. "The Barren ghost?" The older woman sneered, pretty but cursed, could not give us even a squalling pup. Quote, "I will," the new wife said proudly. "A big, healthy boy, one to carry the family name, not like her." Mabel's stomach twisted. Her hands curled into fists at her sides. She turned to walk away. She would not cry in front of them, not again. But a hand touched her shoulder. Silas. He had stepped out of the store, boots dusty, eyes steady. He looked straight at the two women, then turned to Mabel with a voice low and calm. "She is the only one who gets my daughter to sleep," he said. "The only one who teaches Benji not to throw stones. The only one who makes our house feel like it has a roof." The two women fell silent. Silas gently guided Mabel away without another word. The whole wagon ride home she stared at her hands. He had stood up for her. No man had ever done that. That night she made a small wreath from wildflowers. She set it on the table without knowing why. Her hands needed to create something gentle again. A few weeks later, everything in town shifted. Rumors began. The new wife, so proud and sure, still showed no sign of pregnancy. Her smile faded. Her voice sharpened. Then the truth came out. She had lied. Her husband discovered the trick and threw her out. Rage and shame followed him. One morning, Mabel was buying flour when he approached her. Her ex-husband. Hat crushed in his hands, eyes hollow. "Mabel," he whispered, "I was wrong. You are the only woman who—" She lifted her hand to stop him. "I remember the day your mother spit on me," she said softly. "The day you let them throw me out like spoiled food. You did not defend me then." He swallowed hard. "I was a fool." Mabel stepped forward, voice steady as a heartbeat. "I have 4 children who hug me every morning. I have a man who never asks what I cannot give. My home is full of warmth, full of peace, and I would rather sweep ashes for Silas than sit in your parlor like a decoration." She turned away before he could answer. Across the street, Silas stood holding a sack of rice. He had seen everything, heard everything. His face held no pride, only something deeper, something grateful. That night, Mabel stepped outside to fetch water. The stars were bright, the air cool. She did not hear the footsteps until a shadow leaned on the fence. Jed, a trapper from nearby, half drunk. "Well, look who Silas brought home," he slurred. "The pretty little mule he bought at the market." "It's late, Jed," Mabel said calmly. "Go home." He stepped closer, too close, just wanted a look. "You owe us a smile." Before she could scream, he grabbed her wrist. The grip was rough, painful, but a sound thundered from the barn. Heavy steps. Fast. Silas. He crossed the yard like lightning, no words leaving his mouth. One punch. Hard and clean. Jed dropped to the ground with a groan. Silas stood over him, chest rising and falling. His knuckles bled. But he did not look at Jed. He looked at Mabel. "You all right?" he asked. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she didn't know why. Silas stepped closer. He took off the red kerchief from his neck and gently wrapped it around her bruised wrist. "No one touches you," he said. "Not unless I say." There was no anger in his voice, only a promise. Inside the cabin, Mabel washed his bleeding knuckles. The room was quiet, warm, heavy with something unspoken. "You didn't have to fight him," she said. Silas shook his head. "I wasn't about to stand still while someone hurt you." She dabbed at the cut. "No one has ever stood up for me." Silas watched her with soft eyes, eyes that saw her as more than what she had been told she was. When she finished wrapping his hand, they sat in silence. The fire flickered between them. Her heart felt full in a way she could not explain, and for the first time the cabin did not feel borrowed. It felt like the start of a promise. What happens when a woman who once had nothing becomes the heart that holds a whole family together? The answer came one cold morning. Mabel was kneading dough in the kitchen when a scream tore through the yard. She dropped the bowl and ran barefoot outside. Silas's youngest boy, Caleb, was crumpled near the woodpile, his leg twisted under him. A fallen axe lay close, its blade smeared red. Silas was already there, lifting the boy with steady arms. His voice was calm, but his eyes were tight with worry. "Go boil water," he said. "Bring the bandages." Mabel ran. Her hands shook as she heated water and gathered cloths. When she returned, Silas laid Caleb on the kitchen table. The boy whimpered through clenched teeth. Blood seeped between Mabel's fingers as she pressed a cloth against the wound. "I know it hurts," she whispered, tears falling. "I'm right here." She cleaned the gash, wrapped it tight, soothed him with every word she could find. Her tears dripped onto his leg as she worked, but she did not stop. Then Caleb whispered something that made her freeze. "Don't cry, Mama." Her breath caught. The room went silent. Caleb blinked up at her with trembling lips. "You make the best biscuits," he said, "and you sing soft like my real mama used to." Her tears came harder, but not from sadness. She touched his cheek gently. For a moment, the whole world stood still. Later, when Caleb was resting and the other children gathered close, one of them hopped into Mabel's lap. "Papa said you're staying," Hannah whispered. "Does that mean you're our mama now?" Mabel could not speak. She only nodded. And it was enough. From that night on, they called her mama without hesitation. Not out of habit, out of love. Silas watched it all quietly. The way she held the children, the way they clung to her, the way her voice softened when she talked to them. Something deep and warm grew inside him. One night, after everyone had fallen asleep, Silas found her sitting on the porch under the moonlight. He stood there for a long moment, then finally spoke. "I'm not good with words," he began. "You say enough," she answered. He nodded once. "When I paid for you that day, I only wanted to give you a way out. I never thought I had the right to keep you." She turned toward him, her heart pounding. "I figured you'd leave once you had your footing," he said. "If that's what you want, I won't stop you." Her breath hitched. His voice held no fear, only honesty. "I used to think love meant someone choosing you right away," she whispered. "But it's better when someone chooses you after they've seen who you truly are." Quote. Silas stepped closer. The porch creaked beneath them. "If you aren't sending me away," she said softly, "then I'm not going." She took his calloused hand in both of hers. "These children made me something I thought I'd never be," she said, "and you let me be that without asking for anything." Silas looked at her with something like awe. "I just wanted you safe," he murmured. "And now," she whispered, "I want more than safe." He pulled her into his arms, not as a man claiming her, but as a man grateful to have been chosen. The next months passed with steady, quiet joy. A garden grew behind the cabin. Mabel tended it every morning, her hands moving with care. Even in drought, she coaxed life from the earth. Silas watched her from the porch with a soft smile, as if she were the miracle he never expected. But hard times came. A long drought burned the land. Crops died. Meals grew thin. The creek behind the house turned to mud. Silas worked himself to exhaustion. One afternoon, he stumbled through the door and collapsed. Fever burned bright on his skin. Mabel stayed by him for 2 days. She fed him broth, wiped sweat from his brow, and whispered prayers she had forgotten she knew. One night, half asleep, Silas reached for her hand. "Mabel, don't leave me. Not you too." She bent down and kissed his forehead. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Not when I'm needed. And here, I'm needed." His fever broke by dawn. And outside, in her struggling garden, a small green shoot pushed through the earth. A week later, they found the first ripe tomato. One tiny fruit, bright red against the dry soil. Silas stared at it like it was a miracle. "How?" he whispered. "You taught me not everything worth keeping comes easy," she said. He lifted her blistered hands and pressed a gentle kiss to each knuckle. That night, they sliced the tomato into 6 thin pieces, one for each of them. It tasted like hope. Time passed. The children grew taller. Laughter filled the cabin again. One crisp fall day, Silas returned from the barn holding a small leather-bound notebook. "I don't have much to give," he said, setting it in her hands. "But if anyone deserves a fresh page, it's you." Mabel opened the book. Blank pages waited inside. New. Unwritten. She picked up the pen. Slow strokes formed her first words. "Today is the first day I was loved without having to give birth to anyone." Silas read the words. His breath shook. He sat beside her and rested his forehead against hers. "Thank you," he murmured. "For what?" she asked. "For staying long enough for us to love you right." Years later, long after the cabin had become a home full of grandchildren and warm bread, Silas carved an arch over Mabel's garden. The words etched into the wood were simple. "She did not bear my blood, but she gave birth to the rest of my life." When they grew old, they were buried beneath the oak tree by the garden they kept alive together. And long after that, travelers passing by would see the sign Silas once nailed to the fence. Not for sale. Because some things, love, home, and second chances, can never be bought, only earned. And sometimes, The people you never expected become the family you were meant for all along.